My paramour of 7 years severed our relationship on account of a dish of boiled fish, he declared. Sang Ran, you are akin to this dish. I have wearied of partaking of it. On the first day of our separation, I wept and implored him not to depart. On the 7th day, I hysterically denounced him as a cad. On the 15th day, I attended his nuptials. On the 2000th day, his wife entreated me with tears in her eyes to visit him. I beheld the photographs of the newlyweds at the wedding banquet and smiled sardonically. The groom Zhang Buyu had been my beau for 7 years. A fortnight ago, he was still in my embrace, yet today he had wed another. Sang Ran. When Xian, the bride who was toasting in tandem with Zhang Buyu, espied me, Zhang Buyu squeezed her hand reassuringly, and the two of them made their way towards me through the throng. The resplendent wedding gown scintillated beneath the colossal crystal chandelier. Truly a match made in heaven. Before I could utter a caustic remark, I fixed my gaze upon Xian's swelling belly, and my heart was rent with anguish. Begone! Zhang Buyu frowned, having no intention of proffering any further elucidation. Before encountering Zhang Buyu, I had envisioned a myriad of scenarios and had even contemplated whether he would forsake all and abscond with me. However, the one I found most unpalatable was this. He had betrayed me prematurely. When Xian seemed intent on provoking me, caressing her slightly protuberant belly and speaking tenderly, it has been over 4 months. The timing was apartment. It was approximately from that juncture that Zhang Buyu procured a plethora of maternity and childcare books, perused parenting illustrations, and altered his mobile phone screensaver to an image of a soft and endearing infant. At that time, I had presumed he was making preparations for matrimony and planning to sire offspring. I had also visited the hospital to consult a physician, and proceeded to the pharmacy to purchase folic acid. It transpired that he was to become a father, yet the mother of the child was not I. When Xian said, "We are contrite for the wrong we have done you, but he has long since ceased to have feelings for you. Sang Ran, I could not hold a candle to you in our academic days, and I have no desire to vie with you. Do not disrupt our union, and refrain from interfering with our marriage. I sincerely express my gratitude." Zhang Buyu did not so much as glance at me from start to finish and extended his hand to support his new bride's waist, fearing that she might grow weary. Many of the wedding guests were our erstwhile college classmates. Observing the commotion here, they were already engaged in hushed whispers. They were curious yet dared not approach. At this moment I resembled a buffoon. I was cognizant that the other party was on the cusp of commencing a new life, yet I had still hastened hither and stood here to endure the indignity. I stiffened my resolve and obstinately refrained from allowing the tears to fall. Gazing upon the countenance I had once cherished deeply, I inquired of him as placidly as possible, "When did this commence?" Zhang Buyu remained silent, and his body shifted to shield Xian. He has always been thus, protecting those he holds dear unreservedly. I had once been the recipient of his protection, yet now I stood on the opposing side. Was it this year or last? It ought to be this year, you and she. Zhang Buyu knitted his brows, regarded the eyes of those in the vicinity, and lowered his voice. Ran, the fault is mine. Do not reproach Xian. Matters have already reached this pass. Why must you subject yourself to humiliation? Humiliation? I must concede that Zhang Buyu is truly remarkable. A few words sufficed to fill me with a sense of grievance, yet I was also ashamed. I lowered my head, tears obscuring my vision, and reluctantly nodded. You are correct. It is not worth sacrificing one's dignity for such a reprobate, felicitous wedding. I wish you felicity. With that I pushed Zhang Buyu aside and exited the hotel. The frigid winter wind buffeted my visage. Merely this month prior to Zhang Buyu's proposal to part ways, there had been boiled fish for every repast for an extended period. I am incapable of subsisting without spicy fare. I have an affinity for spicy cuisine, yet I lack the culinary prowess, and thus Zhang Buyu prepared the meals. Save for dining out during work hours, I partook of boiled fish whenever I returned home. Every meal was replete with it. Before I could voice my complaint, Zhang Buyu said, "Behold, no matter how delectable the victuals may be, one will grow weary of them if consumed incessantly, let alone after we have been together for so many years. Sang Ran, the human heart is mutable. Let us sever our relationship. The human heart is mutable. Even after years of courtship, it is no exception." I returned home and illuminated the abode. This dwelling was somewhat antiquated and not overly capacious. It boasted 2 bedrooms and a living room, yet it was a coveted school district property. Zhang Buyu had been making monthly mortgage payments. It was registered in both our names. We had resided there since our graduation until last month. He had declared our separation and vacated the premises. He had called me 2 days prior, stating that he would return to converse. I was still incensed. Although I refrained from uttering a word, I hastily beseeched my colleagues to assist me in handling the work at hand and requested leave to return. The door of the house was flung wide open. The moving company was bustling to and fro. Zhang Buyu smoked a cigarette and ambled from the bedroom to the living room. I was ignorant of with whom he was conversing on his mobile phone. "Wait for me." Then he terminated the call. I recollect that day. His frigid eyes no longer bore the smile and affection of yore. "Let us sell this house," he said. Only then did I apprehend that he was in earnest. He was truly resolved to part ways, merely because it had been a protracted period and he had grown weary? Nay, if you find the monthly mortgage payments burdensome, then I shall assume the responsibility. I lack extensive experience in the law firm, yet I do earn a salary. Zhang Buyu chuckled derisively upon hearing this and said sarcastically, "It is unrealistic. You have always dwelt in a realm of fantasy." I was instantly enraged. "Why do you seek to terminate our relationship without just cause? Is it due to pecuniary matters? Or are you under excessive pressure at work? My mother did not demand a dowry from you, and you are not obliged to finance the marriage. If all else fails, I still possess savings. Inform me of your tribulations. Is there anything we cannot confront in tandem? I spoke at length, avowing that I had a tempestuous temper and would amend my ways. In the end, I embraced him and wept inconsolably. Do not act thus. Do not depart. Do not abandon me. The man who had hitherto been at a loss when I wept merely permitted me to cling to him and sob for an hour this time, and then said indifferently, because I am wearied. Before I could respond, Zhang Buyu had already extinguished the cigarette in his hand in the ashtray, pivoted, and apologized to the movers who had completed their task, then pried my hand open and enunciated each word with deliberation. Ran, I am wed. Then he retrieved a red booklet from his trouser pocket. I was suddenly rendered speechless. An ordinary utterance, a simple gesture, yet it set my heart aflame and reduced it to ashes. Zhang Buyu so callous, he had obstructed all avenues of escape, and the sole glimmer of hope had transmuted into despair. I incessantly replayed the photograph on their marriage certificate in my mind, time and again. I had forgotten when it had all begun. Zhang Buyu had never been parted from his mobile phone. He had always been wont to cast it aside haphazardly, yet subsequently he even carried it with him when he bathed and would awaken promptly upon hearing it ring in his slumber. I had taken note of this and had engaged in a quarrel with him over it. Who is it? I had erupted in fury when he had repeatedly used the pretext of smoking to converse with someone on the phone in the corridor. Is it Xian? I had not needed to clandestinely peruse his phone. I could discern it by listening to the female voice on the other end. Xian had been a female classmate in the same department as Zhang Buyu in college, and she had once bashfully confessed her feelings to him. What have you to discuss with her, via phone calls and messages? Zhang Buyu had already terminated the call, and dispatched a few more messages. Perceiving that I was endeavoring to snatch the phone, he had hoisted it aloft with his height advantage, and I had been unable to wrest it from his grasp. Then he had enfolded me in his arms and compelled me into the house. We are all classmates. It is arduous for me to rebuff her assistance. Ran, I beseech you to comprehend. After years of cohabitation, I had placed my trust in Zhang Buyu, and thus I had desisted from the altercation. I had been nestled in his embrace and had listened to him chuckling above my head. Behold, the household shall henceforth have no need to purchase vinegar. At that time I had felt a trifle discomfited. A woman's sixth sense is unerring, and many matters also bear telltale signs. Not long thereafter, Zhang Buyu and Xian obtained their marriage license. After Zhang Buyu's departure, I had never returned to reside there. I had been afeared of confronting the empty domicile and afeared of being consumed by thoughts of him at all times. I had repaired to my parents' abode for a few days and apprised them of our separation. Our two families had formerly been neighbors. Zhang's father had perished prematurely due to an accident. Zhang Buyu had tended to his mother while simultaneously occupied with his studies and career. By all accounts, he was a down-to-earth, steady, and reliable individual. I had not anticipated that he would prove to be amiss. Father had declared angrily that he would seek redress from him. After a sojourn outside, I was ignorant of what Zhang Buyu had imparted to him. Father had returned and regarded me, shook his head and sighed. Let it be. We shall subsequently find someone superior. Hearing this, I had been unable to slumber throughout the night. On the way home from work the following day, I had received a message from Zhang Buyu. This had been the sole message he had dispatched to me following our separation. Saying Ran, forget me. I had clutched the phone and had continuously typed, only to continuously delete. Ultimately, I had crouched on the ground and retrieved the dropped phone. I no longer remembered how I had made my way home. I merely knew that I had contracted a high fever that night, and mother had assisted me in taking sick leave. Ran, why do you have a fever? Wait for me. I shall return home forthwith. Ran, procure whatever your heart desires. I shall earn the means to provide for you. Ran, I am truly desirous of marrying you with the utmost haste. Zhang Buyu's countenance had ceaselessly reverberated in my mind. A mere 3 months ago, he had still been pestering me like a petulant child, toiling overtime daily. I grow weary of you even if you do not weary of me. Let us cease toiling for the capitalists. My Ran may attend work as he pleases. If your employer affords you an opportunity, simply dismiss him. I shall earn the means to support you. I have nurtured Ran to be as resplendent as a flower, fair and plump. There is naught unacceptable about separation. However, the negative emotions amassed following the split invariably require an outlet. Yet Zhang Buyu had promptly embarked upon a married life, so cruel as to deny me even this opportunity to vent. I had yearned to call him and upbraid him, yet I had been unable to do so. Scoundrel! Cad! I had been indisposed for 2 weeks and a days. Suddenly one day, beholding my parents bustling and anxious in the kitchen, I had finally marshaled my emotions and replied to Zhang Buyu's message. Very well. 2 weeks later, I had rented an apartment in the vicinity of my workplace and endeavored to resume the normal course of my life. Since then, I had isolated myself from all tidings pertaining to Zhang Buyu. I had refrained from inquiring, refrained from prying, and refrained from ruminating upon him. It is easier said than done. It is akin to a deeply ingrained habit that is excessively arduous to eradicate. Thus, I had conferred with my parents that I must seek to engage in more activities while simultaneously toiling at my job and preparing for the doctoral examination. Perhaps I could enjoy a sound slumber if I were overworked. Thus, more than half a year elapsed. During the lunch break, my colleagues distributed wedding candies and snacks. Lawyer Zhang from the collaborating law firm had become a father and was blessed with a son. Everyone dispatched WeChat messages to convey their felicitations and proffered gifts. When I entered, everyone grew somewhat quieter. I had overheard the commotion outside the door and, not wishing to mar the convivial atmosphere, picked up a piece of candy and placed it in my mouth. This confection was truly bitter. I seated myself at my workstation, touching up my makeup with a powder puff when my colleague inquired, "Are you embarking on a blind date this evening?" I languidly reclined on the table. "Yes, I am of a certain age, and my family is importuning me to partake in blind dates." "You are already 26, are you not?" "No longer in the bloom of youth." In the evening I arrived punctually at the restaurant. As soon as I entered, someone beckoned to me. When I beheld the man's visage with clarity, I was taken aback. "The person you are engaging in a blind date with is I. Did you not anticipate this?" Fu Yutian sat opposite, attired appropriately and no longer resembling the dashing youth on the basketball court. He had metamorphosed into a mature and charming figure in the workplace. I had not expected that the person my mother had introduced was Fu Yutian. Fu Yutian and I did not share many commonalities and were not overly familiar with each other. However, Fu Yutian and Jiang Buyu had been comrades on the same basketball team. I spoke frankly. I did not expect it. It was truly unexpected. The world is vast, yet the social circle is so constricted. I shall treat you to this meal, and after dinner, let us sever all ties by deleting each other's contact information. Fu Yutian smiled. "That is forthright. Thank you. I did not praise you." I regarded the person opposite with a speechless expression. Fu Yutian said, "I am highly satisfied with you and believe that we are a felicitous match. Do you wish to give it a try?" I had no inclination to have any interaction with anyone related to Jiang Buyu, and thus directly declined. "Nay. Is it because I am acquainted with your former paramour?" Fu Yutian said and regarded me gently with a smile. "Is that truly the crux?" "The crux is that I have long held an unrequited affection for you, Sang Ran, and I earnestly desire to court you." It was the first occasion upon which I had heard someone profess their feelings with such vehemence. I obstinately refused to the very end. After dinner and settling the bill, I blocked him in front of Fu Yutian. Fu Yutian was not angered either. He ruffled my hair and said, "Behold how I shall win you over." After that day, Fu Yutian commenced his pursuit of me. He first ingratiated himself with my parents. After obtaining the approval of the two elders, he arrived daily with the study materials he had procured to accompany me in my studies. The last time I had exerted myself to such an extent was when I was preparing for the postgraduate entrance examination. The one who had accompanied me in my review and the memorization of questions at that time was Jiang Buyu. The following year, after the initial and re-examinations, I was admitted to the doctoral program of the University of Political Science and Law as I had hoped. On the day he received the news, Fu Yutian was more elated than when he had passed his own examination and embraced me and twirled me around. It was also on this day that we officially commenced our courtship. Fu Yutian escorted me to a jewelry store, purchased a diamond ring, and placed it upon my finger. He said, "This can serve as an engagement or a solemn pledge. Ran, I aspire to spend my entire life in your company." An entire lifetime? Could I still place credence in such a vow? I smiled at Fu Yutian. I was ostensibly smiling, yet my eyes were inexplicably reddened. In order to enroll in the doctoral program, I tendered my resignation from the law firm. On the day of my departure, I fortuitously overheard from my colleagues that Lawyer Zhang had departed at the commencement of the year, left the city, and had taken his wife and child to seek opportunities in the south. Hearing this news, I could not ascertain my feelings. I merely felt, he no longer existed in this city. Jiang Buyu had never contacted me, and I had never sought him out. Thus we had become two parallel lines, existing in the same world yet never intersecting. In early September, I proceeded to the school to register, and Fu Yutian would visit me at the school from time to time. Occasionally, we would engage in dates, engage in conversations, and it is worth noting that as we gradually became acquainted, we seemed to be truly compatible. Time elapsed and it took me 4 years to complete my doctorate. On the day of my graduation, Fu Yutian and I obtained our marriage certificate. The wedding was a simple affair. With the blessings of both our parents and a few friends, we elected to embark on a journey. We had not even reached our destination, the Shisha Islands, when the arrival of one person disrupted everything. This person was Wen Xian. Wen Xian implored me to visit Jiang Buyu for the last time. 5 years later, when I heard this name once again, my heart still felt as if it were being constricted by an invisible hand suffocating. However, I declined. What has passed is past. Everything has been exhausted. When we were together, I had a clear conscience towards him. After we separated, I endeavored not to resent him, let alone pester him. No one is indispensable to anyone. Once you relinquish it, you shall find relief. I truly could not conceive of any reason to visit. Do you recall the incident you encountered in college? Wen Xian abruptly mentioned it, and I was stupefied. When I was a sophomore, a senior student pursued me with unbridled zeal. After I spurned him, he was consumed by anger and embarrassment. When Jiang Buyu arrived in the nick of time as he was assaulting me, he sustained a severe head injury in an attempt to protect me. This transpired many years ago. When Xian pointed at me with a sneer, Sang Ran, Jiang Buyu saved you on that occasion. He cannot be cured. He is on the verge of death. If you still possess a modicum of conscience, you should visit him without my beseeching you. I did not fully comprehend Wen Xian's words. What did it mean to save me? Why was he fated to die? For a moment my mind was in a state of confusion, and I could not hear what Wen Xian was saying. I merely desired to depart as expeditiously as possible and seek some fresh air. I did not become perturbed by this. I composed myself for a moment. Regarding Fu Yutian, who had brought me a hot beverage, I smiled and clasped his hand. There is no need to cancel the plane tickets. I have no intention of going anywhere. I wish to proceed to Shisha with you for our honeymoon. The past is represented by the ex, and the past cannot be retrieved. The present and the future are what we ought to cherish most. The honeymoon journey traversed the entire archipelago, and the scenery was as picturesque and paradisiacal as could be. Fu Yutian and I were both granted a month's honeymoon leave. Midway through the holiday one night, as I was devising a travel itinerary, Fu Yutian seated himself beside me and expressed his desire for a heart-to-heart conversation. He inquired as to why I was disconsolate. I appeared animated, yet I evinced no interest in anything. I did not concur. I felt that he was overthinking. However, after being in a relationship for such an extended period, he understood me well and knew that I was not being truthful. Fu Yutian cancelled the remainder of the trip and escorted me to the airport. En route, he clasped my hand and said earnestly, "Sang Ran, I shall only be magnanimous on this occasion." As soon as I disembarked, I encountered Wen Xian. After beholding me, Wen Xian thrust her phone into my hand and seized my collar. She demanded angrily, "View the video within. He yearns for you so ardently, and you are disinclined to visit him, Sang Ran. Your heart is as hard as iron. He fought on your behalf in college. For your injury, you are indebted to him with your life. How can you bear to not visit him?" I regarded Wen Xian's phone in silence. There were numerous videos therein. One after another, the shooting angle was surreptitious, and the footage was not overly clear. However, every word was sufficiently distinct to cut like a blade when it entered my ears. Ran, you are exemplary in every respect, yet you are overly obstinate. I must compel her to forget me. Otherwise, this girl will sacrifice herself for me. Do you believe it? She is ailing, and I am ignorant of how much weight she has lost. I am such a damned reprobate. My naive girl, it is truly dreadful. I beheld the man in the video who was pressing his eyes. This was the first occasion upon which I had witnessed Zhang Buyu weep after the passing of his father. It was 5 years ago when he had declared that he was wearied and had severed our relationship, when Xian entreated me to reflect carefully upon the incident that had occurred in college. It was the first time Zhang Buyu had engaged in a brawl. He had fought single-handedly against 7 or 8 individuals and had been compelled to protect me. Were it not for me, how could he have been so grievously injured? It was due to the severe injury to the back of his head that the latent peril had been sown. I still recollect that on that day, the senior student had colluded with many others to profess his feelings to me in public. After I had spurned him once again, he had been enraged and had seized me and subjected me to punches and kicks. The classmates in the vicinity had been panic-stricken and had not dared to intervene. At this juncture, Zhang Buyu had arrived. Zhang Buyu had studied law, after all, and would surely have initially contemplated persuading others with reason. However, when he had rushed into the crowd and extricated me from the ground, everything had changed. I would always remember his fierce gaze at that time. He had shielded me tightly behind him, rolled up his sleeves, and commenced fighting with the 7 or 8 seniors. He could have pushed me aside and bidden me to keep my distance, yet he had professed that he was concerned. Subsequently, when we had proceeded to the hospital, he had also clasped my hand and refused to release it. It was evident that his injuries had been the most severe, yet he had still urged the doctor to attend to me first. At that time I had deemed him my hero, and I had believed that it would be worthwhile to be in his company for the remainder of my life. However, I had never conceived that this had become the catalyst for him to compel me to sever our relationship. When Xian regarded me in silence, querying whether I truly cared for Zhang Buyu, and whether I was truly concerned about him. If I cared, how could I have failed to notice that he had frequently suffered from headaches after his injury had healed? If I cared, how could I have neglected him on account of my thesis and internship? Do you know how he felt when he visited the hospital alone, and listened to the doctor's diagnosis repeatedly? He was gravely ill, yet he was still bearing it alone. From childhood to adulthood, you had taken his kindness towards you for granted. Have you ever truly cared for him? When Xian burst into tears, it was also at that time that she had encountered Zhang Buyu in the hospital. She had been deceived by a cat and had become pregnant. After beholding Zhang Buyu's confirmed medical records, she had suddenly conceived an idea and proposed marriage to Zhang Buyu. He had bestowed a name upon her child, and she had assisted him in feigning a relationship to compel me to relinquish my claim. Do you know why he did not utter a word to you? He did not wish to impede you. When Xian choked with tears, Sangran, have you ever truly loved Zhang Buyu? Your love for him is not as profound as his love for you. When Xian and Zhang Buyu had enacted a charade of a fake marriage, it had endured for 5 years. Regarding Wen Xian weeping, my mind was a blank, and I tightly clenched my palms. In a daze, I seemed to push Wen Xian's hand away and said, "Let him perish. I shall not visit." These words were sufficiently cruel. It was identical to what Zhang Buyu had done to me. Fu Yutian tenderly embraced me. "Ms. Wan, I implore you to desist from disturbing us." I buried my head in his broad and warm embrace and whispered, "Let us return home. I have no desire to behold anyone. I merely wish to hasten home." Unexpectedly, Wen Xian suddenly rushed forward and seized my hand, sobbing and saying, "You cannot be so callous. He loves you so ardently. How can you still, Sangran, engage in a video chat with him? If you regard him, he is on the verge of death." When Xian retrieved her cell phone while weeping, my mind was in a tumult, as if a string had snapped. Perceiving that Wen Xian was on the verge of dialing the video call, I snatched the phone and hurled it aside and delivered a backhanded slap to Wen Xian. Wen Xian was stupefied by my blow. She ceased weeping and regarded me with disbelief, not even knowing whether to retaliate. Sangran. I could no longer suppress the emotions I had striven so arduously to contain. I disregarded the gazes of everyone at the airport and pointed at her and upbraided her. When Exine, if you truly desired Jiang Buyu, you ought not to have devised the nefarious scheme of a fake marriage. If you truly desired him, you could have approached me and divulged the truth on numerous occasions over the past few years. It was patently you who was covetous of Jiang Buyu's tenderness and companionship, and was loath to relinquish it. When I desired to completely forget him and commence anew, when Jiang Buyu was on the verge of death, you self-righteously endeavored to fulfill his last wish. However, do you know that Jiang Buyu is such a proud individual that he did not wish to behold me before his demise? If you truly desired him, you would have preserved this secret for him and permitted him to depart in peace. When Exine, you ought not to have approached me. You have committed all manner of selfish acts, and you lack the courage to admit it. I tore away when Exine's last vestige of pretense and laid bare her thoughts. Hearing this, when Exine was rendered speechless, she covered her face with her hands, wept, and crouched weakly on the ground. I could no longer concern myself with her and Fu Yuqian and thus retrieved my luggage and strode away. I had no desire to have any further contact with anything, or anyone related to Jiang Buyu. En route home in a taxi, I inadvertently dozed off. In my dream, Jiang Buyu beckoned to me and smiled as he had in his youth. Ran, I am departing. Observing him recede, I was unable to utter a word. I exerted myself to the utmost to catch up with him, yet I was unable to overtake him. I beheld his figure fade away, and I awoke from the dream weeping. At this moment I distinctly felt that Jiang Buyu had departed and had bidden farewell to this world alone. Jiang Buyu is afflicted with a hereditary family ailment. Subsequently, I learned that his father succumbed to an accidental onset of this disease. This malady is not triggered by external factors, and the patient appears no different from a normal person. The most perilous aspect is brain damage. Coincidentally, when he engaged in that altercation on my behalf, his pituitary gland was impaired, which exacerbated and precipitated the onset of the disease. After the disease manifested, he forgot everything and remembered naught. When Exine utilized the videos he recorded as evidence to attest that he had forgotten all else but remembered one person, Ran. This name, which he had repeated incessantly, day in and day out, for the past 5 years, had become deeply ingrained in his memory, accompanying him through his torment and his battle against the disease. Ran has a delicate stomach. She ought to eat smaller, more frequent meals, and someone needs to oversee her dietary intake. She is also a bit of a gluttonous little feline. She is also indolent, yet she has a honeyed tongue. If she were sharp-tongued, how could she possibly become a lawyer? My Ran, she is so astute, yet I ought no longer to be a part of her life. Had I known this, I should have distanced myself from her. My Ran will surely make an excellent mother in the future. I aspire to endure for a few more years and behold her child. She is such a comely lass. I cannot fathom her giving birth to an unattractive child. I must concede that Fu Yuqian is passable, but I cannot permit my Ran to suffer. The video clips documented the days and nights he endured in solitude. 5 years, 5 months and 22 days. A total of 2,000 days. He is 1 year my senior, and Jiang Buyu's age shall forever remain at 31. Jiang Buyu had prearranged the division of his inheritance into 2 portions, bequeathing one part to my mother and the other to Wen Exine. He had transferred all his funds to my father in advance, leaving scant remnants. Wen Exine was merely his nominal consort, and these years had been squandered. She still has a child to rear in the future. I understand that he did not wish to be indebted to anyone. In his early years, he had persuaded his mother to remarry and had 2 more children, so that she would have someone to rely on in her twilight years and he could be free from worry. I listened to all this with an impassive countenance, and my heart seemed numb, devoid of any sensation. Father thrust a cup of piping hot tea into my hand, seated himself and addressed me. Recall when you broke up and I went in search of Jiang Buyu? He proffered me a card with funds therein. He enjoined me not to disclose this to you and requested that I safeguard it for you. If your husband treats you well in the future, it is beneficial to have some pecuniary resources at your disposal. If your husband is wanting, then this money shall serve as your fallback. Father had not anticipated that Jiang Buyu was concealing his illness. A hale and hearty individual had vanished. He was so aggrieved that he continued to smoke. When I learned of this, I felt that this fellow had you in his heart. I said I would retain the card on his behalf, and he could retrieve it from me at any time. As a result, this wait endured for a lifetime. Ran, wealth is not hoarded, it is earned. When I was in college, one day Jiang Buyu was leaning on the balcony railing, engrossed in his computer, and he tugged at me. Come hither, brother, you shall instruct you in stock trading and financial management. Once you master this, it shall serve as a supplementary vocation. Let me pose a question first. Do you prefer wealth or me? The sun was blindingly bright. I raised my hand to shield my eyes and on tiptoe kissed him on the cheek. Naturally, I favor wealth. You are so devoid of conscience. I erred. I shall repeat myself. I adore you for earning money for me. You possess the makings of a miserly Zhou. Jiang Buyu clasped the back of my head and bestowed a gentle kiss. Very well, my lifelong reputation is thus entrusted to you. I did not attend Jiang Buyu's cremation on that day. My past with him had concluded completely with that text message 5 years ago. It is said that a good former partner should be as silent as the grave. Jiang Buyu had adhered to this. I had also. When Xian dispatched a lengthy message, replete with guilt and contrition. At the conclusion she wrote, I am in truth extremely envious of you. He desired to depart in secrecy to ensure your happiness. But why? Why can you be content with equanimity? Thus, I contravened his final wish and came to you. Do you believe he will pardon me? Nay, I replied to the message impassively, having no inclination to say more to her. When Xian continued to soliloquize. Finally, when Xian stated that she had relocated, and would vacate the city to sojourn in her hometown for a while. Before her departure, when Xian bequeathed me the key, she suggested that I pay a visit. After much hesitation, I ultimately went. Fu Yutian accompanied me to the rented abode where Jiang Buyu had resided for several years. The room was pristine and orderly, much like him, immaculate. When Xian averred that the items Jiang Buyu had brought when he moved in were all associated with me, I had already instructed Wen Xian to incinerate all his possessions when he was on his deathbed. He believed that leaving a message was tantamount to leaving hope, and the same held true for leaving objects. He desired that I forget him and move forward. Wen Xian was jealous. Although it was a feigned marriage, Wen Xian had truly fallen in love with him. Thus, Wen Xian had defied Jiang Buyu's wishes and wanted me to be cognizant of everything. There was a panda doll left on the bed. They had originally been a pair. I had discarded my doll to the waste collector, and his doll had remained with me until now. Clutching the panda doll, I could not refrain from weeping and my chest ached. If we were to part ways one day, would you seek me out? In my recollection, I merely remember gazing at Jiang Buyu and enunciating each word. I am a vengeful individual. Regardless of the reason, as long as you are the first to relinquish, I no longer desire you. Jiang Buyu, we are still not fated to be. That day, I informed Fu Yuqian that I wished to visit him, merely to take a glance and never again. After many years, I beheld Jiang Buyu once more. Yet it was in front of his grave. He had been so tall and robust, yet now he was confined to a diminutive tombstone, leaving only a youthful and handsome photograph. I regarded him, my eyes reddened yet devoid of tears. The sky was overcast, and it commenced to rain anew. The environs were not dampened by the rain, for someone held an umbrella aloft over my head. Ran. The summons from the recesses of my memory collided with the voice of reality, causing such pain that I lacked the courage to turn around. We ought to return home. Life after marriage was no different from the norm, save that we had transitioned from living alone to cohabiting as a couple. I still lacked the culinary skills, and thus the task of cooking was assumed by Fu Yuqian. That night, he collected me from work and declared that he was inclined to be indolent, and thus we dined at a restaurant. Gazing at the boiled fish served by the waiter, I was momentarily stunned. I endeavored to conceal it, yet Fu Yuqian still discerned it. He clasped my hand across the table, and his tone was as gentle as ever. You have an affinity for spicy fare, and thus I ordered it. Ran, you shall always have me in the future. What he said made me feel. It seemed that my parents had divulged everything to him. In his affectionate and smiling eyes I finally smiled, nodded, and said, very well. I shall heed your counsel, husband. Fu Yuqian's eyes softened when he smiled. After that day, when I was tidying up my belongings on the weekend, I fortuitously discovered a diary. I had formerly been in the habit of keeping a journal. When I opened it, numerous events from the past sprang to mind. February 14th. It was the 7th Valentine's Day with Jiang Buyu 7 years ago. The proverbial 7-year-itch had rendered us somewhat jaded. He set off fireworks. I had anticipated that he would propose, and my excitement was in vain. However, you still remembered that I adored fireworks. I deemed you thoughtful. February 22nd. I am preparing for an internship. It is no easy feat to become a lawyer. How does Jiang Buyu manage it so effortlessly? He said that an internship is a trifling matter. Listening to these vexing remarks, it seemed a taunt. Nay, I must toil harder. March 7th. What has Jiang Buyu been engaged in of late? With whom is he conversing in the dead of night? March 10th. He is behaving furtively. Jiang is up to no good. He is truly overburdened with work. Am I being overly suspicious? March 28th. I abhor being distrustful. My mother said that women who are constantly on the lookout for signs of infidelity are the most pitiable. I do not desire to be such. Jiang Buyu, if you do not amend your ways, I shall depart. April 3rd. Jiang Buyu is indisposed. He has a headache. I accompanied him to the hospital, yet he declined to go. Is it truly of no consequence? June 6th. He no longer experiences headaches as frequently, and he no longer makes calls. However, ought you not to offer me an explanation? For all these years, and for all the pregnancy and parenting books you have procured, I shall refrain from reproaching you for the time being. June 8th. I took leave and visited the obstetrics and gynecology department of the hospital for an examination. I am in good health. The doctor said that if one desires to conceive, one ought to prepare in advance and consume some folic acid. I yearn for a healthy infant. October 1st. Jiang Buyu is perturbed. I shall await his disclosure so that we can jointly address the issue. October 10th. Jiang Buyu declared that we had severed our relationship yesterday, and had packed his luggage in advance. Jiang Buyu, consider this carefully. If you release my hand, I shall not look back. October 25th. Your wedding day with Wen Xian. Jiang Buyu, from this day forth I shall forget you. November 19th. I was ailing. My mother proffered much counsel. I informed her that I was not suffering on account of Jiang Buyu, but that I wished to glean a lesson from this relationship. June 9th. My mother incessantly importuned me to partake in a blind date. I am not overly aged, and I shall not encounter difficulties in matrimony. Why must I engage in a blind date? June 12th. I partook in a blind date to placate my mother. Why is the other party Fu Yuqian? I detest all that is related to Jiang Buyu. June 15th. Fu Yuqian was importunate, and my parents held him in high regard. Alas, I merely wished to work and not engage in courtship. June 16th. It is no easy task to thrive in the legal fraternity. I aspire to take the doctoral examination. My parents support me. I desire to obtain a doctorate and embellish myself with the degree. July 14th. Fu Yuqian learned to cook and prepared meals for me daily. So what? I still have no inclination to court. On August 8th, Fu Yutian accompanied me in practicing questions. Why does he possess such knowledge? On January 28th, the Chinese New Year is nigh. Fu Yutian, do you not have a home? Why do you sojourn at my abode for the New Year? Well, I am rather content to have you in my company. On February 14th, Fu Yutian presented me with a rose. He said that since I had not consented to his matrimonial proposal, we were not officially a couple, and thus he only bestowed one rose upon me and proffered the remainder to my mother. On March 1st, I commenced preparing for the examination. Press on. On March 30th, I passed the initial test. Fu Yutian, my parents and I celebrated. I increasingly felt that my mother was correct. I had developed an affection for him. On May 2nd, I passed the examination. Fu Yutian was more elated than I, and I consented to his marriage proposal. Today is the first day of our official relationship. He presented me with a diamond ring. I am awaiting his fulfillment of his pledge. On May 21st, Fu Yutian and I have been in a relationship for 3 years and 19 days. Today we obtained our marriage certificate. You said that you would never permit me to experience sorrow for the remainder of my life. You said that you would never permit me to feel desolate in this protracted existence. You said that you would take care of yourself and outlive me by several days. You did not wish to consign me to solitude. You did not wish to entrust my funeral arrangements to another, even if that person were our child. You said that even if we had a child, I would remain your sole priority. Fu Yutian, remember to substantiate your love with deeds. I hope that when we depart this life, I shall not rue falling in love with you and marrying you. August 23rd. I graduated and joined a new law firm. My employment is now stable, and it is time to deliberate on the wedding. September 7th. We are to be wed tomorrow, and our honeymoon shall be in the Shisha Islands. September 9th. I did not anticipate that after several years, I would learn of Zhang Buyu from Wen Xian. I shall not visit him. I am a self-centered individual, and visiting him would be a disgrace to my former self. September 29th. In the end, I still visited the cemetery to behold him. Zhang Buyu, you are a self-righteous poltroon. Fu Yutian came to escort me home. Zhang Buyu, I seem to have forgotten you, and you ought to forget me as well. Fu Yutian's perspective. It was a dreary day and snowflakes were descending outside the window. Fu Yutian drew back the curtains, approached the bed and called softly, Ran, the first snow of this year. Do arise and behold it. The figure beneath the quilt turned over. After a protracted interval she murmured drowsily, well, you may observe it yourself. Very well. Let her slumber a trifle longer on this rare weekend. Fu Yutian tucked in the quilt and ventured out alone to retrieve the camera and capture the snowscape. Gazing at the falling snow, memories seemed to recede into the mists of time. Why are you doggedly pursuing me? After the blind date, Sang Ran did not evince the slightest appreciation for Fu Yutian's persistent wooing. She seized an opportunity to cut to the chase. Pray do not tell me that you have conceived an affection for me. Sentiment is the most unreliable of things. You possess excellent credentials and are not overly advanced in years. There are multitudes of maidens who hold you in esteem. Why must you fix your attention upon me? Sang Ran was posing the question with the utmost seriousness at that time. Fu Yutian also ruminated with great deliberation. Yet in the end, he merely smiled enigmatically and remained silent. Why did he pursue her? How ought he to articulate it? Those clandestine infatuations with her in his youth, that ecstasy when he learned of her separation, those calculated plans for his return to the country for the sake of her, all those deliberate maneuvers when he discovered that she was engaging in a blind date. Sang Ran regarded him without uttering a word and sneered. You deem it a form of amusement. You have always been wont to vie with Zhang Buyu, and you would derive a sense of accomplishment and something to boast about if you were to ensnare me. Sang Ran, it is not that she is difficult to capture. It is that he has hitherto been bereft of any opportunity. Fu Yutian halted Sang Ran and said with a helpless smile, you are speaking of others, not I. Sang Ran, I am enamored of you. I am not jesting. How could Sang Ran credit such a claim? Although Sang Ran's parents held Fu Yutian in high regard as a prospective son-in-law, they did not wish to contravene their daughter's wishes. Fu Yutian was at a loss as to how to deal with this intractable obstacle. If he desired to surmount it, he could not afford to make excessive compromises. Thus he adopted a circuitous strategy. He refrained from excessive pestering and contact, and only responded to matters of necessity. For instance, when she was preparing for the doctoral examination, he dispatched review materials to her and then exhorted her to strive assiduously, yet he did not accompany her. It was not until Sang Ran was struggling mightily to secure a suitable mentor, and achieving naught that Fu Yutian sent a message intimating that he could be of assistance. Sang Ran would not hazard her academic future, and thus consented without delay. Fu Yutian introduced her to his mentor and 2 other professors. Gradually, when Sang Ran encountered intractable problems during her review and was unable to fathom or comprehend them, as long as she solicited Fu Yutian's counsel, he would patiently elucidate them to her. In this manner, day by day, the rapport between the two was scarcely enhanced. It was the weeks preceding the examination that truly caused Sang Ran to lower her guard. At that time she was under prodigious pressure and in a state of anxiety. She refrained from contacting anyone for several days, and did not even visit her parents. She sequestered herself in the rented domicile and became reclusive. Her parents were perturbed and contacted Fu Yutian. Fu Yutian knocked on the door. Sang Ran presented a ghastly countenance, yet she still curbed her temper. I apologize. I am well. My parents are inconveniencing you. I am truly contrite. Listening to her feigned fortitude, Fu Yutian directly extended his hand, pulled her over, and enfolded her in his embrace. Why are you suppressing your emotions? If you are aggrieved, simply express it. You need not be so sensible. Weep if you are inclined to weep, laugh if you are disposed to laugh, and speak your mind. What if you are in a foul mood? What if you lose your temper? I am here for you. It was these few words that utterly shattered Sang Ran, who had been repressing her feelings for an extended period. When she had wept her fill, he would gently wipe away her tears and say, "My Ran, you are even more comely when you weep." When she professed fatigue, he would prepare snacks and milk tea for her, saying, "Replenish your energy and then you may converse. I am all ears." When Xian made an appearance on the wedding day, in all candor, Fu Yutian did not wish for Sang Ran to become cognizant of all that pertained to Jiang Buyu. Love is a selfish sentiment, and no one can be entirely magnanimous. He selfishly desired to possess Sang Ran in her entirety, yet he could not bear to witness her in a state of sorrow. Thus he said, "Sang Ran, I shall only be generous on this occasion." Fu Yutian employed tenderness to gradually and day by day melt the ice in Sang Ran's heart. If Jiang Buyu was her tribulation, a relinquishment that fulfilled her felicity, then Fu Yutian was her salvation bestowed by the heavens, and he was resolved to grow old in her company, day and night. Jiang Buyu's perspective. 1. Jiang Buyu clutched the diagnosis proffered by the hospital and methodically smoked 2 packs of cigarettes, one after the other. The brain had sustained severe injury, and the damage was irreversible. Regardless of the extent of treatment, it would not alter the ultimate outcome. He did not wish to forget Sang Ran, did not desire her to reproach herself and be burdened with guilt, did not want her to endure a fate akin to that of his mother. He had not witnessed his father's illness and thus was ignorant of the excruciating nature of the process, but he beheld his mother's daily existence, a torment more agonizing than death. He could not permit Sang Ran to undergo such an ordeal. It was a hereditary family affliction. If he and Sang Ran were to have a child, the child would not be his source of hope for her but, rather, a source of torment for her. Jiang Buyu was not afeard of death. Contracting the illness was a matter of fate, and he accepted it. However, what had his beloved maiden done to deserve this? Why should she squander her prime years and live in the shadow of a deceased individual such as himself for the remainder of her life? He yearned for Sang Ran to be happy and to smile with genuine mirth every day. A brief, sharp pain is preferable to protracted agony. Ran, I have no alternative but to be callous. Jiang Buyu made a resolute decision, and encountered Wen Xian prior to his departure from the hospital. The two chanced upon each other accidentally, and Jiang Buyu's possessions and Wen Xian's belongings were strewn all over the floor. He espied Wen Xian's pregnancy test, and Wen Xian also beheld his diagnosis. Wen Xian was petrified. Jiang Buyu was uncertain whether to laugh or weep. "It is of no consequence. I am well, am I not?" Simply refrain from divulging this to Sang Ran. Wen Xian was perplexed. "Why? Why are you concealing your illness from Sang Ran? Are you apprehensive that she will misapprehend me and you? Then I shall proceed to elucidate the matter to her. It is not a misapprehension." This man who could smile in the face of the doctor, console his mother, comfort others, and resolutely shoulder everything himself when confronted with illness, still had tears glistening in his eyes when he spoke of Sang Ran. "It is merely that I cannot impede her progress." How could Jiang Buyu bear to subject his Ran to such suffering? When Xian was consumed by jealousy and proposed a feigned marriage, Jiang Buyu regarded her with solemnity. "Save for the nominal union, I can offer you naught. Are you certain?" When Xian was certain that it would be a worthy endeavor to marry the man with whom she had fallen in love at first sight. Thereafter, Jiang Buyu returned home as if naught had transpired. He telephoned Sang Ran at the time of her departure from work, and then observed her return home before terminating the call and concealing his phone. He carried his phone with him even when he bathed and awoke promptly when the alarm sounded as he retired for the night. He visited the bookstore and procured a multitude of books on motherhood and infancy, and placed them haphazardly upon the table and bookshelf. Everything was meticulously calculated with the sole intention of creating the illusion of infidelity. He believed himself to be adequately prepared. Yet when he noticed that the medication Sang Ran was surreptitiously ingesting was folic acid, he cursed the heavens in fury and delivered several self-inflicted slaps. After that, Jiang Buyu intensified his efforts. He perused the parenting illustrations daily and openly reviewed the common knowledge of pregnancy, no longer endeavoring to avoid Sang Ran. The opportune moment had arrived. Only the final step remained. He selected the boiled fish that Sang Ran adored. On the first day, he watched her partake of it with gusto, fanning her mouth as she ate with relish. Jiang Buyu lowered his head, averted his gaze and dared not look at her. He continued to prepare boiled fish the following day. Sang Ran detected the spicy aroma and entered the kitchen. "Xiao Jiang, confess and I shall show you leniency. Was it because the lady who purchased fish at the market extolled your handsomeness, and you were unable to resist the temptation and closed the stall for her?" The hot oil sizzled the chili peppers, and Jiang Buyu choked and coughed repeatedly, conveniently displaying his impatience. "Begone." Sang Ran did not become incensed. She opened the window and proffered him a tissue. "Wipe it promptly. Your eyes are inflamed from the spicy fumes." He grasped the tissue, and his hands trembled as he watched her exit the kitchen. Day after day, Sang Ran had been consuming boiled fish for half a month. She was disinclined to complain and would merely pout at him with a sense of grievance. Jiang Buyu was awaiting this moment. He packed his belongings in advance, declared his intention to sever their relationship, and departed. After slamming the door, he could still hear her weeping. "I am truly sorry, Ran." Jiang Buyu's perspective too. Jiang Buyu proceeded to the bank, consulted the real estate agent, sold the mortgaged house, and disposed of the stocks in his possession. In his estimation, money was the sole thing upon which he could rely, and thus he liquidated as much as possible and deposited all the funds onto one card. Not long thereafter, Sang Ran's father made an appearance. Observing the men who arrived at the company in an aggressive manner, Jiang Buyu prevailed upon his colleagues to depart, walked over unaccompanied, and still addressed him as uncle. Uncle? You ought rather to address me as father. Sang's father gnashed his teeth in anger. All are composed of flesh and blood. How did our family treat you? Answer me with a clear conscience. Why? I have witnessed your growth. Do not attempt to deceive me. Jiang Buyu surreptitiously clenched his fists, and his meticulously practiced guise was expressionless, so frigid as to be flawless. He retrieved the bank card and proffered it. This is my savings. Refrain from informing Sang Ran and safeguard it for her. What is the meaning of this? Are you endeavoring to bribe my daughter to sever ties with you? It is compensation. It is not a substantial sum, but it is preferable for her to have some pecuniary resources at her disposal when the need arises. Uncle, I am truly contrite. I have disappointed you. Sang's father was not disappointed. Rather, his anger metamorphosed into incomprehension. He grasped Jiang Buyu and uttered a plethora of earnest words. Jiang Buyu did not heed a single one, insisting that Sang's father accept the card, and ultimately said, I am to be wed. Do not permit Sang Ran to squander her time on me. Precisely at that moment, Sang's father espied Wen Xian approaching Jiang Buyu. At that instant, Sang's father was genuinely disillusioned. Many matters were roughly managed, and Jiang Buyu took the opportunity to peruse the lengthy messages dispatched by Sang Ran on his mobile phone. He smoked throughout the night. The following day, he and Wen Xian obtained their marriage license, contacted the moving company, and telephoned Sang Ran. In the abode where they had resided, he stood on the balcony and espied her hastening to hail a taxi from a distance. She had lost weight once more. Foolish girl. His trembling hands had failed to ignite the lighter on numerous occasions. Even if he was fully prepared, how would it feel to repel the person he cherished? It was akin to being lacerated by a blade, a fate more wretched than death. Jiang Buyu's perspective 3. On the wedding day, Jiang Buyu was cognizant that Sang Ran would make an appearance. She would witness with her own eyes his union with another, and was endeavoring to compel herself to relinquish. This was precisely what Jiang Buyu desired. However, beholding her eyes brimming with sorrow and listening to her tearful benedictions, he was in such agony that he would have preferred death. He wished that she would create a scene to vent her emotions. However, his naive maiden did not wish to part ways with him in the end, and would rather endure in solitude to preserve a modicum of his dignity. Jiang Buyu would clandestinely observe Sang Ran daily in accordance with her work schedule, and the time she returned home. He watched her depart for work and observed her return to the apartment after work. This was unacceptable. Before he could steel himself to exercise self-control, he became disoriented. The path he traversed daily had suddenly become unrecognizable. Wen Xian discovered him in the darkened alley. Wen Xian was panic-stricken and apprehensive, yet Jiang Buyu anxiously inquired of her. What time is it? Ran is to take the college entrance examination tomorrow. I must inflate my bicycle tires. At that moment when Xian's heart sank, the rate at which the disease was deteriorating was excessively rapid. Jiang Buyu cooperated with the hospital's treatment regimen. He desired to persevere. He did not wish to forget her. Wen Xian observed him ingest handfuls of medication daily, and resolutely ruminate upon his Ran time and again. The more Wen Xian pitied him, the more incensed she became. She located a photograph in Jiang Buyu's photo album and deliberately pointed it out to him. Your Sang Ran has already become attached to someone else. This is he, your erstwhile comrade on the basketball team, Fu Yutian. Jiang Buyu ceased thinking about her. Cannot you focus more on me? Sang Ran has fallen in love with another. She does not merit your love in this manner. Hearing Wen Xian utter such words, he, who had never been angered by a woman, spoke harshly for the first time. Silence. Every day thereafter he monitored them. He watched Fu Yutian woo Sang Ran, watched Fu Yutian accompany Sang Ran, watched Fu Yutian gradually, step by step, assume a position by Sang Ran's side and supplant him. That is correct. Look forward, progress forward. My Ran merits the finest. In September of that year, Sang Ran was to register at the university, and she would emerge as a doctor upon graduation. Jiang Buyu seated himself in the vehicle, and watched her enter the campus from a distance. That silhouette was indelibly imprinted in his mind. Even if the illness tormented him and the situation deteriorated, it would be arduous to efface. He tendered his resignation and, at Wen Xian's behest, escorted Wen Xian and the child to the south. It is said that fallen leaves return to their roots, yet he did not wish to perish in the city where she resided. My Ran, you must enjoy a long life and be blessed with numerous progeny. It is lamentable that I am unable to accompany you until the end. This is my regret and ought not to be yours. End of the full text.